Everybody wants to be their best.
And so really the study of performance psychology is how our mind exists and works through stress, high stakes, pressure, and ultimately to achieve results in even the worst circumstances.
There are a lot of parallels when you're talking about high stakes, high pressure situations.
We have to consider how are we setting up our children and how are we setting up that next generation of elite thinkers, of decision makers, of company builders and future changers.
I like things that I can measure. How do you measure behavior change, how it shows up in earnings, risk, and valuation multiples, at the end of it?
Simple is not always easy. And why aren't we teaching the ABC version of these to our children when I know for a fact the people I'm working with at the highest levels need this type of coaching?
Welcome to Max Value, the show for business owners and their trusted advisors who are on a mission to maximize their value with business valuation, exit planning, strategy, and maybe even how your behavior as a leader actually moves enterprise value. I'm your host, Ben Town. Today, I'm joined by Lauren Johnson, a performance psychology consultant, got to get that right, and coach with a background in sport and elite performance. She's worked with with professional athletes, namely the Yankees baseball team. She's also founder of Mental Reps Company, the Mental Reps Company, which is the first to create toys designed to build mental skills through routines and resilience and growth mindset for children ages 3 to 6. And she's known for turning pressure drills into mental reps and translating sports science for business leaders. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, this is this is a new and interesting area because everybody wants to be their best.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all trying and striving. I want to be my best. How do you take the lessons that you've learned in performance psychology for an elite athlete? Well, I guess maybe any athlete really to do their best, but you've coached pro athletes at the highest levels. I mean, what's really pulled you from sports psychology to business coach? There's no line drawn between the two of those.
Well, what's interesting is when you hear performance psychology, most people think of sports psychology, right? And it's like you think of sports psychology, and performance psychology really is a broader term for that. So it's both athletes and business professionals are working towards an outcome, right? They're working towards performing and achieving an outcome. And so really the study of performance psychology is how our mind exists and works through stress, high stakes, pressure, and ultimately to achieve results in even the worst circumstances. So just the theories alone apply to both settings and multiple others. I mean, we're talking high risk occupations like the military, firefighters, police officers, people that are like nurses and doctors and surgeons, and all of this still applies to even them, as well as actors, actresses, singers, performers, and even the sports world and beyond. And so if you're performing or working towards a result or outcome in a high pressure, high stakes situation, this actual practice actually applies. But I will say that's not why I got into it.
Okay.
I got into it for sports. So to your point, I went in because I was like, I want to work in sports. I was an athlete my whole life. Like, this is something I'm really passionate about. And I actually had still a client of mine, Mass Mutual, reach out to me while I was working with the Yankees and asked like, hey, could you come speak to our business leaders? And truthfully, I was like, well, I've never done it before, but I can't see why not. And as I started doing it, I just realized that, business professionals you're just corporate athletes. It's no, there's a lot of different situations and scenarios and how things are getting applied. Like for baseball, I'm speaking like languages, the language of a pitcher, where in business, I'm speaking the language of a C-suite executive. Those languages are different, but oftentimes the principles remain perennial across domains.
Well, first off, I'm now going to refer to myself as a business athlete.
I love it.
Sorry to all those real athletes out there. I think it absolutely makes sense, though. There are a lot of parallels when you're talking about, high stakes, high pressure situations, and there's a reason why in business we use a lot of metaphor, and a lot of that metaphor comes down to sports metaphor. Get to the end zone, or all, all of those things that tell us visually in our minds what it is that we're talking about. I have to ask you though, what sport
What sport did I
do
play?
you? Yeah,
I played soccer, and I played it all through college. Absolutely loved it, and I still love it. I still love to watch it. But I was never going to be like the next, like, Mia Hamm or Alex Morgan, or like, I wasn't going to be that. But I really did take it seriously, and I really enjoyed it.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so going from sports to business, I mean, do you have a favorite example of how you turn training for sports, training into a game or a mental rep to recreate pressure and kind of get yourself, inured to the stress?
Yeah, so I think we should start by defining like what a mental rep is. And a mental rep is really like a bicep curl for your brain. And so when you think about going into the gym, like, you're not going to build muscle if you just keep lifting the same weight. At some point your muscles and your body are going to adapt to that lift, and in order to achieve a different outcome, you have to lift a little bit heavier. And so that's an important piece here, is because a mental rep is that little bit of bicep curl for your brain. It's stepping just slightly out of your comfort zone. It's stretching your knowledge and your current skill set just a little bit. And so that's, I think, they're a really important piece. And one of my favorite examples that I think we can use both in sport and then translate it to business is, people would ask all the time, like, how do you prepare? Let's just use pitchers for example. For like, how do you prepare them, in their minor league seasons, so that when they face hopefully game 7 of the World Series one day, they're prepared and they can handle and manage the pressure and stress. Well, what we know is we can never recreate the feeling of the World Series, right? We can't be like, all right, pretend it's game 7. It's a 3-2 count. Like, it's like, we're not going to do that, and the pitcher's going to go, oh, I feel like I'm in the World Series. Like,
Right.
obviously not. So how do we recreate that? Well, what we know is that when you're under pressure and when you're under stress, there's a set of physiological symptoms that occur.
Hmm.
So while we may not be able to create those mentally, we can create them physically. So we would have our pitchers do, we could do sprints, we could do jumping jacks, something to get their heart rate elevated as if they're under pressure, and then get on the mound, and you have to pitch a certain sequence, hit your spots in a certain time frame. That right there can recreate what pressure feels like in your body. And then we can use the tools that we teach to make sure that we're managing that and navigating that appropriately. And while it won't be exactly alike, we will create a familiarity in our mind when we feel it in the World Series, to go, your body is not suddenly signaling this is a threat. It's signaling this is a challenge and I can manage this. We may not be able to change the situation, but we can change ourselves within it. And I think the same goes for business, is that before you go into a big meeting, you're going into a negotiation, you're going into a chat with a big client, those same symptoms can occur. How are we managing those? Well, we have to first discuss what our body is signaling, which is a challenge or a threat. And then we have to choose our response to that. Because there's a fascinating study I'll share, and it's of skydivers. And what they did is they took two different sets of skydivers. One group that literally thought their life was being threatened, jumping out of a perfectly good plane. And then another set was also nervous, but felt excited. Like, they were like, oh, this is a challenge. Like, I'm excited for it. And what they found were two different physiological symptoms and biological changes occurred when they simply thought of jumping out of a plane differently. People that viewed it as a threat, their body went into protection mode. And so what their brain did is it released a bunch of cortisol. It kept their blood vessels. They actually they constricted, so it kept all of the blood towards their major organs of their body, which means they had less cognitive function because they had less oxygenated blood to their brain and all other limbs, and it was all associated with feelings of fear. Where people that viewed it as a challenge, or like, hey, I'm excited, like, to kind of overcome this, like, it's a challenge, I'm still nervous but I can do this, their body did the exact opposite. It actually shut down the release of cortisol. Their blood vessels dilated, creating more oxygenated blood to their brain and their body. Their heart rate variability improved, and it was associated with signs or thoughts of confidence and feelings of confidence. And so I share that because even though it doesn't matter what the situation is, if you care about it, you're going to feel some degree of pressure. It's directly correlated to that care piece. So we don't want to eliminate it. We just want to manage it. It's kind of like that old adage that you don't want to get rid of the butterflies. We just want to get them to fly in formation. And
Oh, I
so
like that too. Metaphor.
yeah. So as we train our executives and as we train our athletes to manage how they're feeling and not to signal our brain that this is a problem, but this is actually a challenge to embrace, our body shows up differently. It creates the biology of courage. It creates the biology of putting us in the best position for success.
That's super cool. Your body's going to react to a situation, period. And by training, you can recognize what's going on with yourself and be self-aware. And it is interesting. I hadn't heard of that study where being self-aware in itself is part of the management process. Uh, yeah, because there are times when you have a near miss in your car or something like that, and suddenly you're overwhelmed and your body wants to shut down, and unless you're a trained driver, that's not something that you're so used to. But on the other hand, making a stressful situation into a challenge, like, frankly, this podcast for me has become a fun, positive challenge, and that's part of why I like doing this, compared to that first one was a little rough, a little challenging.
That's right. But you have to start with your first if you're going to get good at, your in order to get to your 1,000th episode that is streamlined and smooth, you first have to go through being not as good at it. It's going to, your first attempt will feel clunky. Your 1,000th attempt will feel smooth. And so it's the process of improvement. And you're right. It is a repetitive process that as you continue to make those decisions and better decisions under these circumstances, the better the outcomes become. And I thought Mookie Betts had a great perspective on this. Mookie Betts plays
Just
for the
one.
Dodgers, just won the World Series, and he said that final play where they actually got the out and won. He said, "I've never been more nervous in my entire career." And I think we have this thought that because he's at the level he's at, that he doesn't get nervous. And the truth is that it doesn't matter what level you're at. Nerves are a part of the process if you care about it.
Mhm.
He cared about that World Series. And so he felt it. But what's different is that their response is different. And so the gap between the nerves and their response is really short. And so there's not these huge gaps between wins and losses, good choices and bad choices.
Mhm.
They're really good at getting back on track. So he feels that. He said that he started talking to himself, and it was his self-talk that helped keep him focused.
Gosh, I have to have you talk to my 8-year-old goalie. She plays for the Sharks junior team.
Love it.
She needs that.
Happy to.
So, talking about leaders,
Mhm.
I definitely subscribe to the idea that leaders are made and not born. Uh, but we don't often get leadership skills, training, education, very early in a person's life or in our schooling. But we have the capacity to learn the best early, right? We have neuroplasticity, when we're children. So how do we start early? How soon can we start when we're with my kids? Maybe I've missed the window, but with somebody else, maybe my friend Eric, who's having a baby daughter next month. How would he do it?
First of all, love this question. Second of all, neuroplasticity can occur our whole life. So the difference is when we're young, there's a window where neuroplasticity is the most automatic, meaning we don't have to really think or be intentional for neuroplasticity to occur, which is a good and bad thing, right? Because if we're not intentional and mindful of what we're teaching
Mhm.
at these ages, we can be creating these neural pathways that now we have to overcome later. Now, you're going to need to do that no matter what, because what we know is any process that continues over time needs to be upgraded over time with life's new challenges, new chapters, all of those things. So it doesn't mean that it's never going to happen, but the cool thing is that at this age, neuroplasticity is so alive and well, and it doesn't take a lot of effort in order for it to occur.
Mhm.
So having said that, when it comes to mental skills and mental skill development, we can start as early as 3. I have my son is 3 years old right now. He's my test subject, so I can confirm. We actually started even a little earlier than that.
Okay,
But
he's exceptional, obviously. That's
well, we hope so. Hope they don't royally screw him up. No, but he. The interesting thing about kids is I like to think of it like the ABCs of mental performance. When you look at reading, writing, and you look at where do you start? At some point, you want to be proficient in reading and writing, but you don't start reading and writing. You start with the ABCs, and you start by memorizing what they are. Then you go to sounding them out, and then you go towards putting them together, and then you go towards sounding out the words, and then you go towards saying the words. And so it goes in this process. And what I found to be so interesting is after I had my son, I started thinking, when can I start teaching these principles? Because these principles are, a lot of them are very simple. They're not, simple is not always easy, but they're simple. And why aren't we teaching the ABC version of these to our children when I know for a fact the people I'm working with at the highest levels need this type of coaching? All of us do. Even coaches need coaches. And so when I thought about that, I was like, why aren't we teaching this? I didn't learn this stuff until I got introduced to it in high school. And I didn't really grasp it until senior year of college. And that's when I decided to go get a master's degree in this. And so I got to thinking that, and I started testing it with my kid, seeing what could he grasp. Well, he's already grasping concepts. He knows what perseverance is. He knows what growth mindset is. He knows we've been implementing certain phrases when mistakes happen, or as he's pursuing something, and it's all around some of these principles that I teach my MLB players, my professional soccer players, my C-suite executives, and my son's already starting to grasp the ABC version of this. So I say that because you can start early, and what we're doing is like a process in business or like a process for an athlete. We're creating new ways to process thoughts, mistakes, behaviors, frustrations for our children. And so, what we're really doing is we're creating these neural pathways to create elite decision makers. And as we can continue to help our children become elite decision makers in these areas that they can control versus what they can't control, and areas of growth versus a fixed mindset, we're going to set them up for success. And we're also going to set them up to better manage the difficulty that life will inevitably throw at them. So instead of removing the difficulty, we're improving their tolerance to be able to not only manage it, but overcome it.
I'm inspired. I think it just really is the case that we don't learn enough of this stuff early enough, or many times at all. And by stuff sounds very, very vague, but some of the tools, like even, use of words and terminology, which is, how we communicate and also encode things in our brains a lot of times, just using the right pronoun. And I mean, I versus we, or,
Mhm.
what I mean is we versus I, uh, really helps build team. And doing some of those things intentionally is just not natural necessarily. And we have to learn how to do those things. And if, we just come at it when you're an adult and learn little pieces at a time, like that, for example, is a great, I hate to say tool, but a great technique, great way of thinking. It's a great way of thinking. but it's only one little piece, and it's not integrated with the whole concept. So it's awesome that you can build that bedrock of concept early on, so that we can, as mature humans, add them together later and integrate them later. That's cool.
Yeah, well, and I think too. The last thing I'll say about that is that if it's kind of like in if you've ever read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, there's a story he tells about a plane, and he goes, if a plane is to take off at LAX and its goal is to land in New York City, but right when it takes off, it adjusts the nose of the plane just 3 degrees south,
Mm-hmm.
it'll end up landing in Washington D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I think about development of children, is that it doesn't take a whole lot for us to just adjust the trajectory to put them in a better position for success. And so at the beginning, when you take off, if you adjust the nose 3 degrees, that's only a couple feet. But when you multiply it across the United States, you land in a whole different spot. And so for children at the beginning in this early development, if we just adjust the way that they're thinking, adjust their behavior patterns, adjust the way that they approach challenges and difficulty, we can change the entire trajectory of their life.
And that's cool. And tying that back, I mean, you're now talking my language. Compounding differences over time, right?
That's
Uh,
right.
1% better every day, or 1% better every month, whatever, really does have that just amazing outsized effect over a period of time, over a period of constant effort, versus being static, versus whatever else. You've created a company called Mental Reps, and it's designed to start the core facets of leadership, like discipline, habit building, emotional control. So how does that set somebody up? I mean, we've been talking about it a little bit, but how does that really set somebody up as a high performing business owner later? Let's draw the straight line between those two things. I mean, what can my 3-year-old self hypothetically have learned that will should now serve me as a business owner today?
Yeah. Well, I think we should start with what the through line is. And it's this idea that simple systems relentlessly executed creates excellence. And so if you look at any team, okay, I mean, I'm biased, but the Yankees that has incredible outcomes, right? And when they're consistently successful, the question is how? But we know that when they're consistently successful, an individual, a team, know that there is a system in place.
Mhm.
And so what we're doing is we're creating these simple systems early. And when they are relentlessly executed, and or we can use the word repeated, we create these strong neural connections, or we can call them mental muscles in our brain, that instead of defaulting to comfortable, instead of defaulting to ease, which is easier to avoid something than to face it, it's easier to fall back on the negative thoughts than it is to speak powerfully to yourself. When we think of those kind of default settings that are all around us, even our children, we can begin to create these simple systems repeatedly that develop that mental muscle in your child's brain that overrides the default. Because at some point, when you create a really strong neural connection, what happens is this sheath called myelin starts to grow around a neuron, and it insulates the connection. Just like if you think about a copper wire and electrical tape,
Mhm.
insulates the connection. And so what that means is it takes less effort to execute. So what if we built a generation of children who defaulted to powerfully speaking to themselves powerfully instead of beating themselves up? What if we built an entire generation that thought in a way that helps them grow instead of kept them exactly where they are? Or an entire generation that embraced challenges instead of avoiding them? And so when I look at that, these are the same things that make elite executives, elite athletes, elite performers in any domain. And so starting at this young age will give them more experience and more reps that will help serve them later in life that they can continue to build upon.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Well, and that's what we're saying we're building those neural pathways. I mean, the pathway, literally biologically speaking, is the enforcement of that myelin, right? It is not natural, or the way people are wired to embrace difficulty, right? We all want it to be everything to be easy. Uh, but yeah, high stress environment, you want to make the right decision, which is oftentimes not the easy decision. And that's in business, sports, and everything.
Yeah, and it's no one's fault. It's how our brains are wired. Our brains are survival mechanisms. And so they are literally wired to keep us safe. The problem is that our brain is very powerful, but it's not always right. And so sometimes it will try to keep us safe in an area where it's actually better if we go after it, if we go towards it.
Hmm.
And so your brain, if it detects any threat, its job is to literally retreat and save you. But
Hmm.
we recognize that there are situations that does not apply to. In a lot of situations in modern society, it does not apply to, especially when you're going after something great. Because when you're going after something great, you are inherently going to fall into the environment of high stress, difficult, unfamiliar. And all of those things, your brain actively tries to protect you against. And so if we are not developing the pathways and upgrading our default system so that we act on purpose, not by default, that you're naturally going to fall into that. So we have to consider, how are we setting up our children, and how are we setting up that next generation of elite thinkers, of decision makers, of company builders, and future changers. That's really what we're looking at here. But you're right, it's everybody's natural default to think in that way. And so if we begin to help our children navigate that and increase their tolerance to being able to develop those uncomfortable challenges that, again, life will inevitably throw at them, we are going to put them in the best position of success. Does it guarantee it? No, of course not. We can't guarantee it. If that were the case, like, my life would look very different. But the idea here is that we can improve the odds, and we can put them in the best position for success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we're talking about, taking a leap, going out there and trying to do something great, I mean, you're doing that right now. You're with Mental Reps Company. Obviously, you're starting this. Maybe give me just like a maybe 30 seconds about it. I mean, do a quick intro, and what we can do is we'll put a link in the show notes to talk about it a little bit more, link back to your information. I mean, I know you guys are fundraising right now, so it's really important to uh, just be able to get out there and connect with the right people. So yeah, I mean, please give me a little bit more about the company and the product.
Yeah, so we're really excited. Again, I thought of this after my son turned 1 and thought, when can I start teaching mental skills? Turns out a lot earlier than you think. And so we're creating the first toy line that teaches mental skills to toddlers. And we're talking about, this is the foundation, the ABCs, that really helps you as a parent implement these mental reps, these bicep curls for your kids' brains, to help to develop those neuroconnections for success, not only immediately, but also that can consistently help them later on in life. I think a lot of the things that I've seen, they address a short-term need, but not long-term development. We are looking at both the short-term need and long-term development, so that next time your child faces that challenge, they're better apt to handle it. We're teaching a skill, but through play, the best way kids know how, which is, again, through our toys that we've created. And the, I'll say, intentional consequence is that as a parent, this will actually impact you. My son told me the other day, I didn't finish my routine because my bed wasn't made. And I was like, good call. You're right. And so he's even noticing it. And the intentional consequences, that not only are you developing mental strength in your kid, but you're actually developing mental strength in your family as a whole.
Awesome. Well, he sounds like an articulate little guy.
Yeah. That's for better or for worse, right?
Oh, eventually for better.
Yeah.
uh, Again, we'll have more information in the show notes for you. Thank you. Everybody, I want to take a second here to share something about who we are and why we make this show. You're probably here because either you or a client of yours is thinking about buying or selling a business, bringing in investment, or planning an eventual exit. And that is why we call this show Max Value. We provide you with information and insights about how to maximize the value of your business. Our team at Town Advisory guides business owners through the crucial, often once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to exit their business. We use our trademarked Exit Builder program to help business owners prepare early, protect the value they've built, and obtain maximum value through an exit. And the secret is, our clients define what value means to them. Taking the right steps now can make all the difference in creating a successful outcome for yourself, your family, and your work team. If you think you're ready for the next step in understanding and increasing the value of your business, make a comment, send me a message on LinkedIn, or send me an email. All those links are in the show notes. But all right, getting back to grown-up businesses, uh, I don't think vibes only coaching is it's not that interesting to me. I don't know. Maybe it helps certain people in certain places, but I like things that I can measure.
Mhm.
That's a little bit more my background anyway, right? So how do you measure behavior change, and how it shows up in things like earnings and risk mitigation and valuation multiples, at the end of it?
Yeah. So a short answer is feedback loops. I'll give you one precise example I use with an athlete is one of the things he really wants to feel before a game is confidence. And so he actually grades himself every game, and then we connect it to his results. And so there's an actual graph that shows the consistency of how is his is his pre-game routine actually setting him up to feel confident,
Hmm.
knowing that you don't have to feel confident to perform in a confident way. But what it does is it really helps to measure, like, again, this is how I'm feeling, and this is how it's actually connecting to my outcomes. Or is there a correlation? And if so, how can we continue to reinforce that system, or what system do we need to adjust? Another thing, and I think much more like long-term strategic when we're looking at teams, is I like to point to this equation by Kurt Lewin, a psychologist from like 1930s, and the equation is behavior is a function of the individual times the environment in which they exist. And so if we're looking at a behavior change we're looking to make within a company, we go, okay, what individual skills do we need to be teaching? And then how do we need to support it from an environment perspective? Because any behavior that is not supported by its environment will not survive. Just exactly like if you think of a plant in the wrong environment will not survive very long. And so when we're looking at creating change from an organizational perspective, that's immediately what we're looking at, and we're going, what behaviors are we solving for? Are we solving for things like attendance and making sure people are showing up on time? Are we solving for things like collaboration and communication? Are we solving for things like motivation and consistency and resilience? And so as we look at that, we define those behaviors, and then we go through, what are the skills we need to teach? We create programming around that. And then from a leadership direction and culture direction, how do we support it environmentally? And that really helps create then our programming for each organization, which is slightly different based on their needs.
Gotcha. Okay, so that makes sense. Some of that sounds like it's, hey, focus on the leader, or certain individuals within the C-suite potentially, and some of that is, hey, how do we work with the behaviors of the team as a whole and make a situation, make a context, make an environment that will support what we actually want them to do. So it's all integrated and not dissonant.
That's right, because what we know is that organizations with high level of engagement, they outperform competitors financially about 21%, greater profitability. And when you think about that, you're like, whoa, like that's all due to their ability to engage with each other, collaborate, communicate. Okay, well, if we can improve those variables, we know that it directly improves the bottom line by, like I said, by on average 21% to your competitors. And I would also say that there's some really great research done by Scott Tannenbaum and Eduardo Salas. I highly recommend. They have a great book. I actually have it right here. It's called Teams That Work. It's a
Okay.
really, really good book. But what they've done is they've worked with NASA, they've worked with high performing teams, and they have done a systematic review of thousands of teams. And they've identified really 7 core drivers for team effectiveness. And it's things like capability, cooperation, coordination, communication, cognition, which is like shared knowledge base, coaching, and conditions. Those are like those structures that really enable performance. And so when you look at these kinds of things, there is a high level of productivity that occurs as a result of that. And really, when I'm going into an organization, we're looking to program to support these things that we know will really drive revenue, and we do measure those against each other.
Even though, I think on, on the episode here, we're not talking so much about numbers specifically. On the flip side, uh, I mean, you have that scientific background. You can point to the study that says 21%, more profitability tied back to these certain attributes, etc. So that I think that's really important.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree, because if I didn't, if there wasn't a result tie back, I wouldn't have a job. Like, plain and simple. Like, it'd be like, I like what you're saying, but if it's not actually yielding a result of some sort, for a company, then it really doesn't matter.
So what's your playbook for turning a mindset into operational habits inside a company? You kind of touched on that just a little bit on the last discussion point.
The process is somewhat different for every company, but there's really like three C's that I dive into with each company, and it's kind of like every player had a different approach, but it was unique to them, and so there is a unique footprint, but there's a framework that I kind of start with that helps guide it. And the first one is clarity. If we don't know who we are currently, where we want to be, what we want to do, and what things need to be changed as a result of that, if we're not clear on all of those things, then we are directionless. And so we really need clarity, because clarity creates then the second C, which is choices. And in between those two is what I call decision filters. When you're clear on what you want and when you want it and how you want it, there's really not many choices that you have to make. It's like a friend of mine, he said, if you want to play in the NFL, there's no choice between chips and an apple. The choice is actually quite clear. And so that's what happens, is we create these decision filters that help us to establish what are those choices we need to be making, changes that we need to be making that will align with the direction we're looking to go. And then from choices, the last C is consistency. And so between choices and consistency are systems. And so you can make a choice once, but that doesn't mean it's going to change anything. You have to decide and make that choice again and again in a systematic way that's repeatable in order to establish consistency. And consistency is fantastic, right? It's really important. That's where we see those long-term outcomes start to occur. But the thing people miss often about consistency is you can be consistent in the wrong direction. And so sometimes when you fall into a rhythm or a groove of like, all right, we got this, these are our systems, our processes are good, as we start to miss those small details or those small 1 degree shifts that are going slightly in the opposite direction, and we're going to end up landing in the wrong destination. So between consistency and clarity is evaluation. And so we need to consistently be evaluating our processes as well, time and time again. So we can go, are we still going in the direction we want to go? If not, we establish more clarity and the cycle continues. If so, we establish clarity that yes, we're on the right track, and the cycle continues. But really, that framework helps me to come in and establish really clear programming needs based on those three C's.
So, some of the best models and frameworks I've seen are cyclical like that, and
Mhm.
it definitely makes sense because the environment, as you were saying earlier, changes, and
Yes.
of course, even we change. As leaders and in our baseline. The other, one other thing I really pulled out from what you were talking about is the number of choices.
Mm.
If you've already pre-decided something like, hey, I'm going to be playing in the NFL, well, that narrows down your choices for what you want to eat, period. And you don't actually have to make that choice every single time. This is the choice I've made. It's consistent with all the other choices I made. That apple's already in my mouth before I'm even thinking about it. That sort of thing. And I think that's a really important concept for business leaders as well. When one of the things, obviously, one of our values is integrity in our business, which is easy to say and sometimes easy to do, other times not so easy. But when the whole point behind having values, for example, is to pre-make those choices.
Mm.
We've already chosen that we are going to be at a what we define as a high level of integrity. Therefore, if we see clients that are not in alignment with us and our values, it's
Mhm.
there's no to your point, there's no decision to be made. We
Right.
just don't work with them. We're done. It does. No amount of money matters. It just doesn't matter. So I really like that whole concept of, no, you've already thought about it ahead of time to set yourself up for success, or your best shot at getting to the goal you want, and then that's it. No more. You don't have any decision fatigue at that point.
Yeah, I love this. Yes, and a perfect like a real life example of this was Ben Hunt Davis, who was the captain of the British rowing team,
Hmm.
and they were sick of losing. They hadn't won since I think like 1910 or 12, something like that. It'd been almost 100 years since they had won an Olympic gold. And they all got together and they just realized that they had three choices. They could do the same thing, get the same results, do something different, attempt to get a different result, or quit altogether. And they decided the middle choice. And so they made a decision filter through a question. And the question was, will it make the boat go faster? Will it make the boat go faster? Yes, then they would do it. No, then they wouldn't. And that decision, using that filter time and time again, aligned them with their goals. And they ended up winning the first gold medal since 1912 in 2000. And so when you just think about that, exactly what you're saying, when you make those choices, you get clear, you create a decision filter that it's as simple as, will it make the boat go faster? No, I'm not doing it. Yes, I am doing it. And that does hold you accountable to that outcome that you said you wanted to achieve.
Ooh, that's really good too. I mean, you have a depth of story, and I think it's great. The dialing all that down, or boiling it down to a one question like that, does it make the boat go faster? In that case, that's amazing. I love that. I have to figure that out for ourselves, and I think most of our clients would benefit from that level of thinking.
Mhm.
Most of the time, for business owners, I've found in our valuation and exit planning, they don't have time. They don't have time to reflect on the business, work on their business, not in the business. They don't have time to think about, okay, well, can we increase this process in some way? Blah 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 blah. But definitely, they don't have time to go to that next layer up and say, well, why the hell are we doing this? What are we trying to do? What is our core principle? Maybe what is our one question? I've heard it stated as, everybody's got a number. What is that number? But what is that one question that we need to answer, and is our guiding star for everything? And I think that does get a little bit mushed up and mixed up with people talking about, okay, well, what's your mission and what's your vision, blah 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 blah, all of the things, which are and can be important, but sometimes that adds a little bit of vagary around the central idea of, well, does this, like, maybe for my business, maybe the question would be, does this improve the lives of our team?
Mm,
I don't know.
so good. Yeah, it's creating that filter question. Play around with it. It's fun.
Hmm,
I
okay,
had an
okay.
athlete say, "Will this make me go D1?" And that was his question. And so it's like it's what is that outcome you're looking to achieve, and how can you form it, put it in the place of a question where you're bringing your future goals to your current decision making.
Oh, you're like present valuing your vision. Ooh, that's
Yes.
interesting.
Yes, because a lot of times we make decisions and we're not thinking about the future outcome. We're thinking about the current pain. And
Yeah.
so when you bring that question in, you're bringing that right. You're literally facing it and you're having to like you can't avoid it and you're like, "Oh, no, it doesn't. I can't do this. I shouldn't do this. I should do this instead."
But one of the things I think we can still do as Renaissance people is make unique connections between disciplines and points of knowledge. And I think that's really where we can stand out. I mean, I was just again thinking about you know you bringing all the concepts from sports psychology into business, into child psychology, uh, and even in our conversation, being able to bring some things together from increasing business value,
Mm,
based on the behaviors of leadership, and how aligned people can be, and decision making, and it's. I think this is been a wonderful, wonderful conversation in that way, and it comes from tying together, you know, your knowledge, my knowledge, and different concepts. Yeah, the concept of present valuing your vision is kind of an interesting one. Maybe I'll play with that later.
Love it. I love it.
So okay, that was the hard stuff. But I do have a couple of questions I wanted to ask you just to get to know you a little bit. Obviously, we were talked about soccer a little bit earlier. What school did you play for?
I played for 1 year. I played at the University of San Francisco, and then I actually transferred down to Point Loma Nazarene in San Diego.
Cool. San Diego's great.
I love it.
So that's something we do already know now. But what's something we don't know about you from your LinkedIn, your website profile, or whatever? I mean, what can you share about Lauren?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, I'd say that the loves of my life are my husband and my two kids. I have a 5-month-old and a 3-year-old, and we have a dog, black lab. And one of my favorite things to do is to just be with them. I mean, it's like the simplest things in life, right? You kind of go back and you go, wow, like seeing the world through your kids' eyes really shifts things in perspectives. And so I think it's changed me in a lot of ways, in a lot of great ways. It's caused me to think about this new business idea, Mental Reps Co. So that's something that I don't always share, at least like on my social media or anything like that. But when I'm not working and pursuing in these two areas that I absolutely love, which is mental performance or performance psychology consulting and Mental Reps Co., I am likely with my children building train tracks and playing outside and playing sports and teaching sports and all of that fun stuff.
Oh, I bet you're looking forward to the ages when they get into sports of some kind. Look, maybe it's chess club, but they're going to get into something hard, right? And that that'll be interesting. My
Yes.
kids, they're into hockey, and so we're at the hockey rink every last night. I mean, every night, every weekend, every night, all the time.
Yep.
But it's really wonderful to see them into something, really passionately going after it. All
Love it.
right, so we've actually talked about a lot of books already. Is there anything particular you're reading now that would be really interesting?
Yes. It's not actually in here. It's on my nightstand. But it's actually all around. It's raising resilience, and it's all around raising resilient children. And it's very research heavy, but I'm loving it because of obviously the work that I'm doing. But like I said, for companies, I highly recommend Teams That Work. And there's one other that's really good called The Brain That Changes Itself.
Hmm.
So highly recommend. Those are a couple good books that I have right now on my list that I'm reading. And I like to go into different directions, not just all psychology stuff, but obviously when it applies to my clients, it makes it slightly more interesting. But I like to look at different domains and how they cross over, because if you look at, I think of like the best keynote speakers, they're comedians. You see how comedians engage an audience, capture an audience, transition between stories. That's who I study. If you look at people that are like the best storytellers, look at producers of movies. They're the best at storytelling. And so I try to look at people that are the best in their niche and try and study them. And especially if they're out of my current industry, that's what really catches my attention.
That's cool. Cross domain knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That's the frontier.
That's right.
That's cool. Thank you. Actually, there's some of the recommendations there that I'm gonna pick up for myself. Thank you.
Awesome.
So obviously we'll put it in the show notes, but if you want to be found, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, which just type in Lauren Johnson, and also follow Mental Reps Co. on LinkedIn as well. And then I'm also on Instagram and X, and I'm like, what are all the names of all the places? And they're all different. So the best way to actually find all of these is to go to my website, which is laurenjohnsonandco.com. Lauren Johnson's a common name. So when I got married, unfortunately, surprisingly, they weren't all available. So they're slightly different in each domain. But if you go to my website, you can find all of them.
Awesome. Okay. Well, very good. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on to Max Value Podcast. This has been awesome. Hopefully you've enjoyed it too.
I've loved it. Thank you so much for having me. Sincerely.
You got it. That's a wrap. You've been listening to Max Value Podcast. And if this episode provided any interesting information, hit that subscribe button, smash like, and drop a comment below. I'm Ben Town with Town Advisory, and I'll catch you next time.